Hi, Jeremy here, Modern Vitality. In today's video, we're looking at a very important distinction, which is healing a disease versus healing a person. This is something you must understand, so I'm going to go into great detail here because the way we understand our problems will influence the way we solve them. Most people who come to this channel, my world here, are trying to heal, trying to get their life back from some kind of disease. Usually there's a diagnosis. Not always though, right? We'll get into that too. But some of these diagnoses like Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, mold exposure, mold illness, right? That's a big one now. It's coming up a lot. We have candida, reactivated Epstein-Barr. Now we have long haulers, adrenal fatigue, MCAS, SIBO, IBS, right? You start to get into alphabet soup territory. POTS, there's a ton of these things, a ton. And there's only going to be more and more and more because of the nature of understanding diseases, right? We can get lost in the complexity there. And one of the best ways to come back from that complexity and look at something more straightforward is learn how to actually heal ourselves as humans, as bodies, as systems, right? Because you are a living system that's made up of a bunch of smaller systems that all interact, which tends to get complex. Most times, right? Most times we try to surrender to that complexity. And then instead of solving the real problem, which is how do I heal myself? Instead of that, we solve a decoy problem, a simpler problem, which is how do I fix this diagnosis, this disease? Okay. Healing a disease is an entirely different process than healing a person. Right? There's a lot of similarities, but at the end of the day, the differences are vast. So in this video, I'm going to explore on this theme. I'm going to expand on it so that you don't get lost in the weeds chasing a diagnosis or a disease. And in fact, some people don't have diagnoses, right? You know something's wrong. You don't have a diagnosis. Couldn't get one. They couldn't figure it out, right? You're a medical mystery. Well, I'm glad you're here because we're going to be looking at why you don't even need to have a diagnosis in order to heal yourself. All right, let's get started. There are layers and layers of cultural conditioning and biases that are in all of our minds. Okay, we just have to understand that. We have a lot of dirt on our lens. We've got a lot of bird poop on our windshield as we drive through life, which includes the way we look at anything, any problem, any situation, but also health, of course. Our culture's medicine is an offshoot of our cultural values, of our cultural biases. Okay, you got to understand we come from a reductionist culture. We come from a culture that wants to isolate things down to one little variable, even if it's a complex system where all the different variables interact in all different ways, right? But that's where we come from. So you got to understand that medicine has this same bias, this same kind of tint on its lens. And when you have problems with your health, brain fog, exhaustion, weird wandering pains that tend to move around, trouble sleeping, anxiety, depression, low libido, digestive issues, hormonal trouble, all this stuff, it's like this huge pile of symptoms and details, right? And then the job of a diagnosis is to try to tidy all that up and to try to reduce it into one bite-sized little thing, one bite-sized little name. And what gets really interesting is the more we expand on this, right, the more we find out that a lot of these diagnoses are really just linguistic convenience, right? It's just a way to try to sum up a symptom picture into one or two words like mold illness, right? Or adrenal fatigue, and try to encapsulate a lot of meaning in that. But what misses the mark is then we lose track of the actual human. We lose track of the actual system of systems that is your body. And this is where actually we have all the leverage. So that the sad irony here is when we go after a disease, when we try to treat a disease, we're actually being totally distracted and we're missing the mark from how do we make this person healthier? There's a whole different mindset. How do we get rid of this disease? How do I become as healthy as possible? Right? It might sound like the glass is half full, the glass is half empty. It's just perspective. It is perspective, but your perspective will change your actions. The way you're thinking about how you're going to solve this problem is going to be heavily influenced by how you're looking at it. There are so many quotes about this, right? Einstein, I believe Einstein had one about the consciousness that created the problem is not the same level of consciousness that can solve it, right? We have to grow. We have to evolve out of our current limited paradigm. And we all have this, right? I'm not on top of the mountain like some enlightened guru. However, I can tell you that from my vantage point, I can see things outside of the common paradigms. I can see new ways to do things. I can see different ways to approach problems, including how to heal your body. And of course, I'm not just making this up. We've got a group. I take people through this process and we get wonderful results. We get wins, success stories. You can find that actually there's a little link in the description here under inspiration. And you can see how people get better every single day using this type of methodology. One of the things I like about this is it's a lot more life affirming. If we start to look at how we can heal ourselves and make ourselves stronger, then here's what happens, right? Instead of getting better recovering from Lyme disease, right? You become a better version of yourself, which means, incidentally, oftentimes there are multiple diagnoses, right? A lot of times people have Lyme and fibromyalgia, or Lyme and mold exposure, or fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, or mold exposure and chronic fatigue syndrome, right? Or candida and fibromyalgia, whatever. Mix and match. There's a ton of these things, a ton of combinations. Most people don't have just one disease diagnosis. So you could get yourself healed from Lyme or healed from mold or wherever you want to start. And I know there are different people who advocate going different ways in terms of which disease you should go after first, but that's entirely missing the mark. Don't go after any diseases, because if you cure one disease, right, but you still have other ones, you haven't done the thing that matters, which makes the person healthier and stronger and more resilient, right? Instead, we can take an internal focus. And of course, I have a process. Stage 1, immune system. Stage 2, digestive system. Stage 3, neuroadrenal. Stage 4, blood circulation. Stage 5, right, the bonus stage 5 is boosting. Hormones, supplementation, that kind of thing, if needed at that point. Most of the time, when we start to take a whole systems look, it can get very overwhelming, right? You say, okay, I want to heal myself. Sure, but what does that mean? The body's incredibly complex. Now I'm overwhelmed. Well, the way we defeat that overwhelm is we start to organize an order of operations. Like I said, stage 1, immune, stage 2, digestive, stage 3, neuroadrenal, stage 4, blood circulation, stage 5, hormones, boosting, supplementing, that kind of thing. Most of the time, people start with this random scattershot of things in all departments at once, and they have blind spots, and they're wondering why they're not doing as well or healing as fast as somebody else who's got maybe more streamlined approach, or somebody else who got lucky, right? The thing they started with was actually appropriate for where they were. One of the first steps here is to start to self-assess and go, okay, what are my relative strengths and states of these different systems in my body? And then moving through that. It can be hard to do this yourself, right? Within our group, I've got a vault full of videos that are interactive so that you can go through and start to build that assessment. You can start to figure out what's going on with you specifically. What's your little clinical picture looking like? And that way, when you start to organize a plan for yourself, you'll know where to start. You'll know where to expect more challenges. You'll know where to expect more backslides. But the really cool thing is, instead of focusing externally on some disease or some syndrome or just some diagnosis that was invented, by the way, a lot of these are just shorthand medical inventions. It's a word game, right? Sometimes it's the strength of I get on this a lot, right? The strength of a diagnosis depends entirely on how well it leads to treatment. If you go to a doctor and they give you a diagnosis and say, you have fibromyalgia or you have Lyme disease or whatever they say, okay, great, thank you, but that's not really why I'm here. I'm not here to get a name put. Sure, it's validating, right? To know, yes, it's not all in my head. I'm not crazy. The things I'm feeling are real. Sure. And sometimes you feel like you need a diagnosis, right? A magic word to validate that. I get it. I understand. And that's not the end of the story. Nowhere close. The diagnosis is supposed to be a bridge to the land where treatment is, right? If you get a diagnosis that doesn't take you anywhere productive, you need to get outside that system. You need to be looking at parallel systems or different ways to think, which is most likely why you're here. Pretty much everybody that comes into my ecosystem has been through some form of the system, and they've hit dead ends, which that happens because that's how they're thinking about it, right? And yes, that system can be very helpful in some cases. Sure, I'm not saying it's one or the other. When we're in a position where you've already exhausted that and you still don't have solutions and you're not feeling like yourself, maybe, just maybe, we could go for a little adventure together where we stop thinking about disease diagnoses and all that entirely, or at least put it aside, and focus more on what we can control, which is ourself, our health. A lot of these diagnoses are really just Latin translations of whatever symptoms you have, right? My joints hurt. Oh, you have arthritis, right? Arthro means joint, itis means inflammation. You have joint inflammation, you have arthritis. Well, you told the doctor your joints hurt, they told you you have joint inflammation. Okay, not very valuable. You already knew your joints hurt when you came in. A lot of these diagnoses are like that. Other ones too that are suspect, anything that, like I said, doesn't lead to a treatment. Well, it's like, what's the point of that? And then, we're going to need more research on that. We're going to need to siphon a bunch of money through nonprofits, and there's a whole lot of economics for people to think they're trying to help, but it's a wasted pursuit because you're going after a made-up name that doesn't have any bearing on the actual state of the health of the human, right? So we have these kind of weird umbrella catch-all diagnoses of exclusion. Any diagnosis or syndrome that's named after a doctor who discovered it, right? Or a place, like for example, Lyme disease, right? Because of this initial outbreak in Lyme, Connecticut, right? Anything named after a place or a doctor doesn't necessarily mean that they've got it figured out, right? So if you have a disease diagnosis that's like that, there's going to be a lot more to the story. Oftentimes there's some kind of mechanism missing from the understanding of the mainstream medical establishment, which is why you're here, okay, which is all right. We're going to shift focus. Instead of healing a disease, we're going to heal the person, heal yourself. What that means is as you get better and stronger, all your different diagnoses should be getting better, right? They should be, because those all come off of you. If you heal yourself in a whole systems way, then you're going to have less symptoms. You're going to have less expression of these different diseases or diagnoses that you may have collected over the years. This happens a lot in a healing journey. I don't want to sound like I'm putting anybody down. I don't want to be critical here, but at this point, it's time for maybe a little bit of straight talk about the reasons why that path doesn't work as well as it should. And it has so much to do with because they're focused on a disease. It's a mental construct. Let's go back to reality and help the person. How do we do that? I already told you. You start taking your body apart and you go, okay, here are the different systems. The ones that are of primary importance: immune system, digestive, neuroadrenal, and then blood circulation. And then after that, right? Once you get those sorted out, it tends to unblock the other things like hormones, right? A lot of people start with hormone supplementation. Oh, I've got a thyroid issue. Maybe you have a thyroid issue, but oftentimes that's secondary or tertiary. Like there are things upstream that are causing that. And those are imbalances that are in your immune system or your digestive system, right? Or you have a neuroadrenal thing where you're having a lot of trouble with your vagal tone. You're getting stressed. You're not able to calm back down from that, right? There's so much to this. When you take a whole picture, which is, yeah, it's important. You know, it's a lot of work to take somebody's case and pull all the pieces apart. It's a ton of work. But once you can do that, and then you can thread everything back together with some order and organization, you don't worry about the diagnosis. And I know I'm going out on a limb here. This is kind of irresponsible to say, right? Here I am in the health space, and I've been making a lot of videos and helping a lot of people, working with people all over the planet, right? Not in a I'm your doctor kind of way, right? But it's more empowering. It's more of getting you on a path of how to think about these things. But here I am saying your diagnosis doesn't matter, right? Kind of a extreme statement. Your diagnosis does matter, honestly. You know, it just doesn't matter as much as we think it does. We give that so much weight that we're totally blinded to the actual human. And that's a mistake. And I know, right, this channel is for patients and people going through their own healing journeys and trying to overcome complex chronic illness. But I do know a lot of my colleagues watch this too. And so for you, colleagues, don't make this mistake. Right? All the practitioners that I mentor, this is one of the first things we start shifting focus from. Instead of looking at the diagnoses, which are just convenient for practitioners to kind of toss those around, right? Instead of that, you got to do the work. You got to dig in. You got to find out about that human being. And then don't get overwhelmed because you need to understand the different body systems and how to organize and articulate a care plan so that your patients can actually get better on their own terms and in order that their body is going to respond to. Then you don't have to worry so much about getting distracted by a keyword, a diagnosis, right? Okay, anyway, back to our regularly scheduled program here. If this is you, if you're dealing with a complex chronic health condition, you don't have to struggle by yourself and be up all night Googling things and trying to become your own doctor, and you don't have to be going to appointments all over town all the time. We have a support group. It's Modern Vitality Solutions and Support. It's international. It's free to join as a guest. You get short-term coaching from me where I'm in there for free, answering any question you have, giving you my perspective. Again, totally free to join as a guest. I would encourage you, find the application link in the description below here. We've got lovely people. It's a positive group. We're having fun, right? I'm very serious about my work. I take everything I do quite seriously in terms of integrity of information and perspective, but we have fun. It's playful, right? It's a nice place to be. And you may find you actually meet some folks in there that you connect with, and you get to have some camaraderie on your journey here. It's a great place to be. We do keep it cozy, tends to fill up. There can be a wait. So if your application looks really wonderful, like you're going to be a great fit for the group, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Might be a month, might be 2 months, somewhere in there usually, but I try to be quick and I'll get you in. It's like first come, first serve. So I try to give everybody the same fair opportunity to join our group. That would be the place to go. You can ask me anything. I'm in there. You're looking over my shoulder. You're watching as other people are going through the same process, healing themselves, not their diagnosis, not their disease, right? What a different world. I hope this video helps you think more clearly about your process and about how you're going to get your life back. What are your next steps? Because you need to free yourself from disease, yes, but you also need to empower your body to get healthier and stronger. The more you do that, the more your natural healing systems kick in. Your body has ways of rebalancing. Oftentimes we just have to activate that. All right, let's get you feeling better. Cheers.